Hi, 5th grade. I hope you guys are all having a good day today and are ready to learn more about volume. So over the past few days, we've been learning about volume, what it is, and what units you can use to measure it. So before we get started with our lesson focus for today, I'm going to ask you guys a few questions about volume and the things we've been learning about. Okay, so hopefully you guys remembered that volume is the amount of space that an object takes up, and it can be measured in cubic units. So what we're going to be learning about today is how we can use formulas to find volume. And before, over the past few days, we've been using little blocks to count the amount of units in an object to find the volume, but we're going to be using formulas today because it can be easier, especially whenever the numbers are really large, so that we don't have to count all of those little boxes. So before I show you guys what the formulas are, it's important to know how to label a rectangular prism. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we're finding the formula of a rectangular prism. So before we go through these formulas, we're going to label the parts of a rectangular prism so that we know what values they're looking for the formula. So here's a rectangular prism, and then the first thing that I have to label is length. So it's going to be how long your prism is. And then we have width, so it's going to be how wide your prism is. And then we have height, so how tall your prism is. And then last one, this one's a little bit different. We have base. So the base is this whole bottom area, and it's measured in area instead of just the number of inches or feet or centimeters. It would be the number of inches, feet, or centimeters squared, just like how we talked about area a few weeks ago. So that's what the base would be. So we're going to go into our first formula now. So our first formula is volume equals length times width times height. So this means that the volume is going to equal those values that we just saw multiplied by each other. So the length times the width times the height. So here's a rectangular prism that give us some values to look at. So if we're going to find the volume, the first thing that we need to do is identify the length, width, and height so that we can use these values for our formula. So as you can see, the length down here is 6 centimeters. The width over here is 3 centimeters. And then the height over here is 4 centimeters. And then our next step that we're going to do is plug these values into our formula. So volume equals 6 centimeters times 3 centimeters times 4 centimeters. And we want to make sure that we're labeling the units on all of these. So after we plug that into our formula, our next step is to multiply these numbers together. So whenever you multiply these together, you get volume equals 72. But we're not finished yet because we need to put those units. And remember that the units on volume are cubed. So our volume is 72 centimeters cubed. Alright, before we go on to the next formula, I'm going to pause for a second and give you guys a chance to work a problem out on your own with that. Okay, so if you had any issues with that last problem, feel free to go back and rewatch the video, pause it wherever you need to, anything like that. So before we go on to the next formula, I just wanted to let you guys know that either of these formulas will work to find the volume of a rectangular prism. You just have to choose which formula you're going to use based on which values they gave you. And this will make more sense in a second whenever I show you the formula. So this next formula is volume equals base times height. So as you can see here, they don't give you the length, width, and height like the last rectangular prism did, so we can't use that length times width times height formula. So as you can see here, they gave us the base equals 12 inches squared, and they gave us the height, which is 5 inches. So here, the volume equals base times height formula would be appropriate because those are the values that they gave you. So our first step, like the other formula, would be to identify the base and the height. So the base is going to be 12 inches squared, and then your height is going to be 5 inches. So then we want to plug these values into our formula. So volume equals 12 inches squared. We need to add this squared in here. Volume equals 12 inches squared times 5 inches. And then we multiply those together to get volume equals 60. And then we need to put our units, so 60 inches cubed. So our final answer there is 60 inches cubed. All right, now I'm going to pause for a second again to let you guys work one of those problems out on your own. Okay, so again, if you're stuck on any of that, feel free to go back and watch the video again and see where a mistake might have been that you made. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is when to use each formula, because I know we kind of went over that kind of fast, so I want to make sure you guys really understand when you should use the base times height formula or the length times width times height formula to find volume. So I've got some examples here that we're going to work through together. So number one, if you're given the base, the length, and the height, which formula should you use? So the length times width times height formula, you would need all of those values, and here you can see that you have length and you have height, but you don't have width. And then for the volume equals base times height formula, you just need base times height. And you guys can see here that you have base and height, so the volume equals base times height formula would be the best option. Okay, so for number two, they give you the length, width, and height. So we know that one of our formulas is volume equals length times width times height. So that formula here would be the best option. And then number three, you are given length, width, height, and base. So for this one, they give you length, width, and height, and which that could be used with our length, width, and height formula. And they also give you base and height. So that could be used with our volume equals base times height formula. So here you could actually use either formula, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. But the base times height formula would be less steps, so that might be an easier, shorter route in the long run. Okay, and then number four, you are given base and height. So we know that one of our formulas is volume equals base times height. So since you have those two values, that formula would be the appropriate one to use here. And then our last one, you are given length, width, base, and height. So that's just like our number three over here. You're given the values for either of the formulas, so you could use whichever formula you're most comfortable with. Okay, so hopefully you guys are starting to feel a little bit more familiar with how to use the formulas, which formulas to use, and things like that, and we'll definitely work more on that tomorrow. But I wanted to give you guys some resources that you could use for more practice. So you can click on either of these links. This first link is a math games link, so it'll provide you with some games to play to help you practice with these. And then this next link is basically a thing where it gives you the different parts of the rectangular prism and you type in the answer. So if you feel like you want some more practice with that tonight, feel free to go to either of these links. And then at the end of the video, I have a little question, and I just want to know how you're feeling about the different things that we learned today. So it'll ask you how you feel about the length times width times height formula, the volume equals base times height formula, and how you feel about differentiating which one you should use when. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.